That looks like it's the lift.
Yeah, that's the lift because the whole thing is accessible.
I'm Sue Spackman. I am a retired chartered architect and became involved with the project here at the Guildhall through my capacity of former chairman of the Devon Historic Buildings Trust. We bought the building off the Devon and Cornwall Police some 12 years ago and then invited the general public to tell us what they thought the future of the building should be. It's a Grade 2 star listed building and has a history which goes back to Tavistock Abbey, which was the biggest abbey in the southwest up until the dissolution of the monasteries. And following that public meeting, it showed that the people of Tavistock wanted to keep the building as a public building, and we sought to find a buyer for it who would follow that idea through, and eventually Tavistock Town Council bought it from us, but worked with Devon Historic Buildings Trust and the Tavistock Heritage Forum, which consisted of a whole series of organisations who were interested in the furtherance of improving the heritage in Tavistock, to look for a future for it. Now, at the same time, the Town Council had sought a grant from Heritage Lottery funding to restore historic buildings in the town which were privately owned. And that included the Pannier Market, the Butcher's Hall, and a couple of other properties in the town where people could seek a grant. And part of that was to go through stage 2, which was to find a future for the Tavistock Guildhall. At the same time as that, the World Heritage Site was being formed for the East Cornwall and West Devon mining landscape. And it was thought that this could become the gateway to the whole of that World Heritage Site. And subsequently, the Tavistock Heritage Trust, which I helped set up, was formed and worked with the Town Council to get a Heritage Lottery grant to restore the building, alter and adapt it, and to put the interpretation in there for the town and for the mining landscape. So that's how it all came about. Very much everybody working together. All sorts of different organisations, the Wharf, which is our local theatre, people who are very much involved in heritage and own historic buildings in the town, West Devon Borough Council, Devon County Council, other interested parties like Mount Kelly School, all came together to look at how we could improve the heritage overall in the town. And from that, because it was very much a community effort, Heritage Lottery funding was forthcoming to make it all happen.
What's been the total cost? How can we pin it down to just the courthouse?
Can't pin it down to one area. It cost 1.6 million altogether, and a chunk of that came from the Town Council, grants from West Devon Borough Council and Devon County Council, but the majority of the money came from the Heritage Lottery Fund. And a lot of volunteer work. I mean, everybody other than the manager is a volunteer associated with it. So we've all sort of come together to make it happen. So the educational side, which happens in the Guildhall when schools come in, is all done by volunteers who have specific skills in education because they're former primary school teachers and so on. But it gives it a direction that it wouldn't otherwise have. And the manager of it now does theatre evenings. We have talks throughout the year in the Guildhall, and we have comedy nights and all sorts of bits and pieces actually going on in the Guildhall to raise money to keep the whole project going.
You've done a bit of research yourself regarding Shire Hall at Chelmsford. What do you think needs to happen there?
The first thing that you need to do is to throw the building open and have a community open day. And you need to have the opportunity for people to write their thoughts on a piece of paper of what they think the future of the building should be. And from that, you can gauge whether there is a really strong public interest in actually saving the building as a public building. If there isn't, then it makes it quite difficult when you move to the next stage of trying to find grants to make things happen. It's interesting that you've already had a substantial grant from Historic England to actually maintain the building. So there is a general consensus that building is really important. And I think it's worth talking to them again about how they see its future. Because they might say that certain areas, for example here, the courtroom was very important. The layout was listed as part of the listing of the building. So it couldn't be changed and altered because that's what that building was all about. So understanding what the interior of that building has got and why it's so important will help you move it forward in the way that it can be used in the future.
One of the issues has been this long 7-year delay. I mean, when it was a lot of money was spent to preserve it, and the fact that we're coming up for 7-8 years now, and of course the COVID hasn't helped, etc., and that they have conducted straw polls, surveys, questionnaires about what to do with it 7 years ago. It's a long time. Has the courtroom fulfilled your hopes?
Well, bearing in mind we've only been open since December because of COVID, and talking about the timescales, this project's taken 12 years to get here from when it was sold by the police. So nothing happens in a short timescale with historic buildings. So the important thing is not to rush it, is to accept that it takes time. Then to look at what has changed in your local community, and you will have noticed, as I've noticed here in Tavistock, that since we've been through the pandemic, our community has changed. The way that we're perceiving things has changed. And to rely on something which was conducted 7 years ago is now not appropriate, I would suggest. It needs to be of the time and how people see the needs in the community now rather than as it was 7 years ago.
But you haven't had any lack of enthusiasm or lack of volunteers coming forward?
No. And the people who are wandering through are delighted to actually see it, that the building is being used in the way that it is.
How much in money, again, did you say total cost was?
The total cost of the restoration of the building and the interpretation boards was 1.6 million.
It's peanuts in the scale of things, isn't it, really? We're not talking about Queen Mary or QE2. I mean, we're talking on a lottery tie scale, peanuts. You can win that with more than that with the one lucky ticket.
Well, you could, but there's also lots of other places that you can go for funding, depending on which way the project thinks it should go. There are all sorts of grant bodies that money can be obtained from. So the important thing is that you put together a working party who are quietly determined to make it happen. People of all sorts of skills you need to make it happen, who are quite resolved to ensure that there is a future for the building. And building up that skill of what you have to put on applications for grants is really important. And you often find that if a grant is achievable from one place, another grant organisation will then follow suit. But it takes time.
But it's a 12-year dream, and congratulations. I've enjoyed that courtroom, and I want to slip back in there for a few minutes to take some more shots. Thank you so much.
Okay, pleasure.
This brings you up into the court.
Wonderful. The defendant, an individual accused in a court of law. And there's another defendant.
These guys were accused of stealing a tin of biscuits. So they ended up having being sentenced to a month's hard labour for stealing a tin of biscuits.
Crumbs.
Yeah.
A month's hard labour for stealing a tin of biscuits, and there they would be facing magistrates.
Yeah, magistrate.
One magistrate, and the full power of the law behind him. And is that the Prince of Wales?
So that's the Prince of Wales, the Crown, and Devonshire coat of arms.
Is that up there, Due Mondroit?
Yeah.
Or Swanee Swarky Mally Ponce? And that one, what's that one, did you say? The Duke of Devonshire?
Yeah.
Right. And who does that represent? That's Justice.
Justice.
Right. Is she blindfolded?
Yeah, she's got blindfold on.
That's wonderful. And who would sit on the left?
That would be your witnesses, your police. You know, you got the two policemen. You got the lady to the biscuits.
This would be the evidence.
So this is all. Here are all your people who would have been in
Okay, the police, witness, a person who sees an event, typically a crime or accident.
The man who they stole the tin of biscuits from.
Right. Was not Mr. Crawford, was it?
No, it wasn't Mr. Crawford.
Or McVitie. The police. In 1887, Tavistock Guildhall was a divisional headquarters for the Devon Constabulary with a superintendent, sergeant and 3 constables. And here, the clerk of the court would sit in front of the magistrate, as per usual. I gave legal advice to magistrates who have no formal legal training. Wow. How many laws have the navvies broken? Do you think this was fair punishment? Beautiful. And these are hats that people role play?
Yeah, we do that.
They role play here, and do they copy an actual trial that
Yes,
took
we've
place?
got a trial to follow.
My goodness, what could be turned, the Shire Hall could be turned into something quite amazing like
We
this.
have the children from schools come in. And do
Children from schools, and then they sit here?
We've got what's called the Discovery Team, so
Right.
they come in and we do activities with children.
What other things? So children, what ages would they be?
Primary school.
Primary school children. So why don't you do secondary when they're starting to get naughtier?
Well, at the moment, because we're just gradually building up things, we've not, we can't do everything. We can't, it's gradually, because we've only been open since November.
And of course there's been problems.
And everybody's here. We're all volunteers.
How many volunteers do you have?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think it's about 30, I think.
30? Yeah. And they're all retired people?
No, various ages.
Do you bring in real life magistrates? Do you bring in real life solicitors?
These are all things we're hoping to do in the future.
What other things haven't I asked you?
Well, I don't know.
So there's lots of potential here.
Yes.
For schools. You might put a few people off a career in crime. And who sits here? Is this is there a jury here?
No, the jury, because it's a magistrate's court.
I know that.
So there's no jury.
But there is a jury at Shire Hall. There are seats still there because that used to be assizes.
Yeah, no, we don't have jury.
Yes.
This is public.
Let me take a view from the top, if you will.
Yeah.